In case any of you thought that you were excited for this moment in time, trust me when I say I'm 1,000 times more excited than you are. Ladies and gentlemen, the coupe is in the shop and it's time to start the Kenne Bell build. Allow me to start by telling you a little bit of a story about how this is going to all unfold. So the coupe's on the hoist, front driver's wheel is off because that is where this whole story is technically going to begin. Now, the last time you seen this bad boy, the old bell of the ball, and how this whole debacle started, it didn't have a throttle body on it. And believe it or not, this throttle body is a fairly significant pain in the ass to mount. At least it was in my scenario. And I think a lot of the reason had to do with this probably wasn't a FlowZilla, or it didn't have this FlowZilla inlet side when it was new, because the two bottom bolts to this throttle body actually go all the way through the inlet and carry on all the way into the outlet side of the blower. Like, these bolts are about yay long, okay? And getting everything to line up so I could get a bolt shot all the way through there was a huge pain in the ass. I had clamps, it was ridiculous. So anyway, I wanted to make sure I wasn't farting around with that once it's in the car. So we bench mounted the throttle body. Unless I change those bottom two bolts, which do not match the top two bolts, she's on there to stay. I also had to do a little filing fabrication here because my IAC was actually hitting this flange. And this is stainless that we built this out of, this extra thick flange. I don't know why the hell we used, I think it was just laying around. But we over-engineered the flange and therefore had to mooch that down so my IAC sits flush. So I've been doing a little bit of farting around and just kind of mocking things up. Now, that is going to be the probably the easiest component to install in this whole thing. You know, it's 8 bolts. Pull the Cobra upper that's on the motor right now, and we bolt that unit down. Now, it most likely, I'm going to call a buddy in to give me a hand lifting that thing because it is quite heavy and you're leaning over the fender and everything. But anyway, that will probably be one of the last things to go on because I have a catch can system that is fairly involved to install. I have a meth kit, which is over on the other side, that's all going to work in conjunction with this Kenne Bell. So meth down there, here's like the tank and some of the hardware hoses. I got Snow Performance's VC50, which is a boost gauge, and also a meth controller. There's a bunch of the shrapnel that we need to install. That's all going to live inside the driver's side wheel well area. So that's kind of where we're gonna start. But also, I have a vintage air conditioning kit that I need to install. And a lot of this, I think you can kind of see my logic here. A lot of this is like accessory slash, you know, power area, like all of this does kind of work together. So it's not a terrible thing to tackle installing all of this at the same time. However, I want to chronologically make it all make sense. So some of these projects are going to be like 50% completed by the time we start on another one, just to forewarn you. But I think first things first, we're going to get this wheel well liner out, start kind of mocking up this meth kit and or loosely wiring it. And I think we'll probably start doing some of the wire tucking that I want to do on the driver's side of this car. Okay guys, so I'm just farting around here, kind of getting an idea of what I want to do. And in case any of you were wondering, gravity still works just fine. It is not broken at all. I got old windshield washer fluid all over the place here. And I kind of got busy and didn't film very much. So maybe I'll just kind of explain to you what I got going on here. So here is all the gear that I have from Snow Performance, okay? Reservoir, pump, all of the various hardware that goes along, nozzles. I also have this pretty slick VC50. It's a boost gauge slash meth controller, and you can kind of dial in all your parameters and stuff with it. It was a kit that I bought in Calgary, Alberta from Mopac, and yeah, all the line and stuff. Anyway, I need to find a place for all of this to live, and I'll maybe just sort of explain to you where I'm currently going with all this. We'll worry about cleaning that up later. So with this tank being what it is, I think a lot of people like mount these in the trunk or whatever. I don't want to do that. I actually don't even want to see this tank at all. So what I'm thinking I'm going to do here is utilize my windshield washer, stock windshield washer fluid reservoir, and I'm going to so you'd fill it up there, and then it's going to gravity feed down into this guy right here. So I will be actually adding, I guess, meth capacity, because I'll not only have that tank, I will also have my washer fluid tank. Planning, mocking, planning. There's not a lot of work being done here, folks, other than trying to see how everything is going to fit. And one of the conclusions I've come to is I do not believe we are going to use this tank, because there's just not enough real estate, unless a person wants to get really fancy with bracketry and mounting that thing up in behind the front bumper. There's just no way for that thing to fit. So we're going to just use the washer fluid reservoir. And one thing I should mention is I thought this was a low fluid reservoir, but with the warning sensor in it, but it's not. So I pulled the pump out of it. I don't know if you've ever seen one of these, kind of a fancy little deal. Anyway, pulled the pump out to see if I could utilize this low fluid sensor that Snow Performance includes in their kit. And I don't think I can, because this thing essentially has to like drop inside the tank, and actually like this, and then the wires need to be pulled through, and then you like squash this rubber gasket in there. Well, if you're using the OEM reservoir, there's no holes that are big enough for that, even with the pump out, you know. And it is a fairly shallow reservoir, so yeah, I don't think we can use that. But what I'm thinking here is the bracket, or the little tab here at the back of my reservoir, is broken. So what I might do is get an order going from LMR, MPD, whatever, and get one of these units with the low fluid signal and see if I can run it through that gauge. I can't imagine that it's anything more than a 2-wire, just a power and a ground, and when this thing sees signal that it's low, it lights itself up and gives you a warning on that gauge. So that's that. Now I'm also horsing around trying to figure out where I want to mount this pump, and I don't have, I thought I could just mount the pump to, like, say the frame rail, but as you can see here, there's not a lot of room. So I'm shuffling around through stuff I got laying here in the shop, and I've found this bracket. I can't even remember what the hell it's for, but I think this thing might bail me out of this mix-up that I'm in. So what I'm thinking of doing is mounting this guy on the bottom side of the frame rail with some riv nuts, and have that pump, you know, kind of whatever, about there, and have that pump hang down, because you can mount this pump in all different configurations, but you have to be cognizant of which direction the flow is. So if I had this guy, you know what I mean, kind of in there like that on this bracket, I think that would work. Here's where I'm going to mount this bracket. Okay, now that first gold riv nut you can see, I chose wisely. I used an M6 and that guy dropped right into an OEM hole. Now, the hole I've drilled right here, that was an OEM hole. It just wasn't big enough. So I mooched it out a little bit. Now, that hole had all kinds of like slag, almost like that hole was punched in at the factory and not drilled. So it was all like the steel was coiled over and up in the hole there. So anyway, as I opened it up, I thinned all that out, and then I just took myself a punch and a chisel and just kind of tapped it all over. Obviously I can't get a camera up in there to show you, but I've been, you know, feeling my way through, making sure I'm getting rid of it. And I've created myself a smooth hole because these riv nuts, right? You obviously need to get them to squash on this collar. And there was enough slag that this collar wouldn't have even been able to squash. So brackets in. The pump's not mounted yet. I just wanted to kind of have a proof of concept here. So I've bent this bracket in such a way that it should, in theory, contour to the wheel well liner. This is the component of all this that I was kind of dicking around and fighting with. So you can see the wheel well liner has that natural slope to it up in the front section here. And I think I've taken that into consideration. I haven't ran the liner in yet, but I'm about to, and see if this all fits the way that it's supposed to. Okay guys, so proof of concept here. Let's see if I can get you up in there. So I'm just kind of roughed in, but you can get an idea of how this is all working out, right? So I think she'll do, and it'll stay out of any kind of elements. Not that this car sees a lot of them, but I think this is going to work just fine. All right, we're all mounted up and ready for wiring. I'll just give you a quick little look at kind of how everything looks mounted in case anybody out there needs any ideas in and along the lines of how you would mount a pump like this. The next step, obviously I need to plumb that and, you know, wire it and everything, but that is going to be part and parcel with a little bit of a wire tuck that I need to get after here. So I'm going to tidy all this garbage up. This has been a long time coming. So busy tucking this wiring harness. Years ago, like whatever it was, 2017, when I pulled the motor out of this thing, I did do a wiring tuck on the passenger side. Took that harness off the shock tower and tucked it in behind. You know, you guys have probably seen me do that on Project Revert. And then I did a kind of a hybrid one on this side on Project Revert too. Anyway, this stuff was, well, it was pseudo tidied, but it was still all in like clumped up format, essentially how Ford intended it to be. It'd been out of there once or twice, but that's about it. So I wanted to clean all this up and tuck this stuff in and around behind the headlights and into the inner wheel well. And so the front half of the harness is all pulled through. Yeah, I mean, kind of looks like ass right now, but anyway, it's all draped through there where it should, well, not where it should be, but where I want it to be. And now I need to kind of drape the back end of it all through. I think I tackled the easy side first for sure. And one last thing I'll add in here, folks, and I hope you understand, is I'm actually really enjoying wrenching on this car again. I haven't done this on my own stuff where it wasn't like pressurized and, you know, I'm doing it for somebody else or whatever. I mean, even these videos, sometimes I feel the pressure. And yeah, I'm just kind of enjoying, got the tunes playing, you know, got a beer going. Like I'm just reminding myself why it is that I love horsing around with these cars. So my apologies if I'm missing anything that you wanted to see, but there's always the comments down below and I try to get back to everybody. So if there's something you're questioning that you don't see based on what I show you, hit me up and I'll get back to you. Or send me an email. Go to my website, send me an email. That's real easy too. The pile's growing. But just wanted to give you kind of proof of concept here, ladies and gents. Granted, this still looks like quite the rat's nest, but we've come through and essentially tied everything together. All right. Now, what's going to go on here is I'm going to run like a stud, a power stud, that'll essentially, you know how your starter solenoid gets quite busy on the battery side? Well, this is going to alleviate a lot of that. I haven't quite decided if I'm going to leave my solenoid, which you can see just kind of hanging out up there. I haven't quite decided if I want to bring it on this side or leave it there. I think I'm still going to rock my like coil cover. You know what I mean? That plastic jobby there that kind of ties into the shock tower. And I might leave that up there because leaving that up there gives you a really nice, the ability to jumpstart your car with a screwdriver in a really worst case scenario. So, yeah, more on that later. But I just wanted to kind of give you an idea here of everything wrapped around inside the wheel well and not, you know, draped over the shock tower like everybody's so used to seeing these cars, right? Good morning, folks. Open up my windows here. Sorry for all the wardrobe changes, in case you hadn't noticed already. This project is happening over days, so I'm just kind of squeezing time in when I can. It's a little harder to sell the wife on the fact that, hey, I'm busy at the shop when you're just working on your own stuff. But anyway, a little bit of updates going on here this morning for you. Parts are showing up. So I can't remember if I mentioned this to you or not earlier, but we're doing an electric fan setup on the old car. I really do like, and those of you that have followed me for quite some time probably know, I do enjoy a good old-fashioned, properly done mechanical fan setup. However, I think we are going to be reaching the limits of this mechanical fan's capabilities, so therefore I'm going with a contour setup. And not to get too convoluted or into the weeds with how I'm going to be running this, but I'm going to be doing it a little different. Now, I do have the full like LMR contour fan Dakota digital setup here. However, I'm not going to be using the Dakota digital controller. I'm going to be running this off a temp sensor that, you know, you can get these things online. I'll try to give you guys a link to them if you're interested in checking them out. But a temp sensor that essentially kicks on much like a thermostat. So it'll ground itself out at 185 and it will uncouple itself or unground itself at 175. Then I'm going to back that all up with a manual switch. So I have full control over that electric fan system by the flip of a switch. So anyway, I got some other stuff in here too. New diff bushings. This car and the convertible both need those. So that's kind of what's going on in there. And then this is a little more relevant to the program at hand here. Here's our new washer fluid reservoir. And the difference between this one and my old one sitting over there is this guy has the low fluid sensor in it. So I'm going to try and figure out how I can run this low fluid sensor with the Snow Performance VC50. All right, guys, give you a quick look at, well, at least the wheel well liner in there loosely and everything tucked away. So the only kind of things you can see hanging out here is slightly in the shock tower, okay? Now I'm going to pull this wheel well liner out. I'll give you a quick view of how this is somewhat temporarily ran. I mean, it's more or less 100% in there, but I've got more things to wire up here, as I've mentioned. Good grief, those things are a pain in the ass. Okay, so here is the tuck operation. And like I said, the kind of uglier side of it. Went to great lengths to try to not make it ugly, but you know, when you're dealing with just a pile of OEM harness wires that you try to make go places that Ford never necessarily intended them to, this is what happens. So long story short on this, for anyone that's considering doing it, I went to as great of lengths as possible not to interrupt any of the OEM wiring. Now, there's a bit of a caveat with that, okay? I did have to extend some things. So I extended, let's see. I did not extend my coil wires, okay? So those were left intact. However, I did extend my starter wire, okay? Pink with a blue stripe. That guy got maybe 6 inches of length. And there may be a better way of doing what I've done here, but I did want to keep like the OEM top or connector here on it. So, you know, I guess maybe you could, yeah, I don't know. There's probably more ways than one to do it, but that's just what I did. So I extended that. I saw that as a fairly minor interruption in the harness. And what else? Oh, I cut my ground wire. So sorry for some of you, this may be boring, but I did cut this guy and I extended it. I ran a new positive and negative cable here. I'll show you when we go up top, but cut that and extended it. And actually, yeah, I got rid of this plug too. I see this plug is fairly silly. You can see here that this one's snapped, most of them are, and that just allows it to pop out with not much effort. So anyway, that is now soldered and locked together, and well, it's up in that mess of wires. What the hell was the other one I extended? Oh, I had to extend my the plug going into the master cylinder here. Okay, so those 3 wires got extended again about 6 inches. That was all I extended. Okay, everything else is OEM length. I had initially ran the bigger harness through this hole, okay, this round guy in front of the shock tower, I guess like inboard, and that just did not give me enough length. It pretty much got everything sort of clumped down in this area, and that is not a good area to live there. Your wheel well liner won't go in as you want it to. Things need to be up higher like this. So yarded all that out, massive pain in the ass. You can thank me later for not filming that. I would have been kicked off of YouTube for all the words I was using. And anyway, came through here, the back side of the shock tower, and went up with everything, okay? And then you can see way up there, sort of in the top, I've got that power stud that I was mentioning, and all my fusible links and everything is now kind of tied into that. So another thing that I mentioned is I was going to still run my starter solenoid, which I am, and this all sort of came to light as I was wiring this all up, right? So I've got, you know, LMRs, 3G alternator and all that stuff. So I've got like all kinds of things going on that do need to be tied into constant 12 volt power. This is my fuel pump. If you caught my video there where I ran a heavier gauge wire back to that bigger liter per hour fuel pump. Essentially what I wanted to do is run anything that had the possibility of failing in the middle of, you know, being out for a cruise or whatever, inboard. I wanted to be able to access it, right? So not that I'm really fearful of this fuse popping off the 3G alternator, but whatever, it came inboard. There was no real good place to mount that fuse inside here. And if, God forbid, you ever did have to get that fuse on the side of the road, you're going to be hating life, right? As you're trying to lay underneath your car and work around the wheel well liner. So that came inboard. Like I said, my fuel pump, the bigger wire that's fused up here, that came inboard. I'm also going to run my contour fan inline fuses inboard. All this stuff is going to live behind that stock coil cover, and then I can, whatever, pop the hood and access it if need be. What I want to do is actually run a little bit of an experiment. Okay, so here's our new washer fluid reservoir. What I think I'm going to do, being that the battery is out of my car, is I'm going to run my battery over here, and I'm going to, with jumper wires, wire this up to that VC50 Snow Performance meth controller, and I'm going to fill this thing up with water, and, you know, which will obviously raise the float that's in here that tells this thing that it's got a low fluid sensor, or that it's low on fluid, and see if this will talk to that. I really want to make sure that goes on before I go to any more trouble wiring anything else up. And then from there, we'll drop this guy in and we'll start plumbing some of the line. I picked up some fittings here at the parts store. So technically, these are the fittings that Snow Performance gives you to run from the like the suck side to the blow side of your pump. I am going to run this one on this side because it's going to go to that red line that I was just kind of pointing at. Okay, and that's what's going to go up and ultimately feed the blower. But on this side, right, I'm going to have just rubber hose that's coming down from my OEM reservoir, right? So needed a bit of a different fitting, actually. Okay, we'll be right back to this experiment in 1 sec, but before I do this, so I want to fill this thing up with water, and I don't want it puking water all over me, right? Just to test this sensor out. So I have to put the pump in, but before I do that, something I noticed when I was kind of thinking my way through this is, it's going to be hard for me to show you here, folks, but if you look down in this hole, like the feed line that pump pushes fluid through to like give your windshield washer a good old-fashioned bath, ain't that big. I hope you can see that in there. So I wanted to hone that out because, again, I'm not sure if you can see this, but the hole on the top that I'm covering with my finger is a lot smaller than the actual tube that the line feeds. So I wanted to work with my old one here first just to make sure that this wasn't going to cause me any grief. So I honed it out, and you can see now I'm pretty much opened up as big as the line is, or the like this end of it. So I guess where I'm going with all this is I don't want to run into a situation where I'm starving that pump for fluid. So anyway, I just opened that up real quick. What am I using here? An 11/64 drill bit. Okay. Holding it upside down so I'm not getting any junk in the tank, and just kind of honing that guy out. So anyway, another little kind of word to the wise is something I'm doing here just to give myself as much fluid as possible. All right, folks, just so I can get a handle on what it is that I'm actually looking for when I go to wire up this reservoir and its low fluid sensor, I wanted to wire up the low fluid sensor that Snow Performance provides you with, because obviously this is going to work with the gauge. That's what it's intended to do. So I'm all wired up here as if this was in the tank, and I'm going to liven up this gauge and get a sense for what happens with it, okay? So here we go. We'll feed it some power. Okay, so flashing yellow. Oh, there we go. Okay, that makes sense, because that's how this thing would work. Is this thing is buoyant, so when you got a full tank, this goes up and shuts off and tells you that you're full, and as it comes down and flattens out, boom, it flashes at you yellow telling you you're low on fluid. So this is test 2 on the OEM tank. All I've done is ground one side of the sensor on the OEM tank, ran the other line to my sensor feed on the gauge, and I've got nothing in this tank right now. It's bone dry, so in theory when we liven this thing up, it should flash yellow like we saw before. Okay, good sign. Now the ultimate moment of truth is going to be when I throw water in this tank, if that flashing light disappears. So I know this may not be as riveting for some as it is for me, but I'm actually quite excited to see if this actually works. So unless I've got to wire this thing the opposite way around, I'm going to go with a big fat no that this works. Well, that sucks. Okay, well, I think the experiment confirms it here. the OEM sensor will not work for me. So back to the drawing board we go. Okay folks, the whole situation wasn't making a hell of a lot of sense to me as to why this wouldn't work. So I pissed around with it a little bit, drained it out, rattled everything around, because this, from what I gather anyway, this sensor is a bit of a, it's on slides almost, like it floats up in that regard. It doesn't swing like the Snow Performance one does. So anyway, I was like turning it upside down, back and forth, and I couldn't hear anything. So I banged it around a little bit, and all of a sudden you could hear it rattle around. So I gave it another go. I did it off camera, but here, just for proof of concept, my whole theory actually does bloody well work. Jeez, I was gonna be like, is this a rip in the Matrix or what the hell's going on? Okay, so drain tank, flashing yellow, telling you get some meth stat. Okay, we'll fill her up. There we go. And that's about a liter, right? So 1/4 of a gallon. Goes to show you, I guess, that once that thing starts flashing, I've got about a liter's worth of meth left. So this is good things to note anyway. But anyway, I guess the point being, what I thought didn't work, works. So this is beautiful. Hi. Okay. I think we've reached a point where I can give everybody a bit of an update and show you just what the hell is going on here and talk you through what's to come. And now I didn't do a time lapse on everything that I've gone through here today since I last left you with the whole like, let's try out this fluid reservoir sensor. But, and I don't know if you guys even enjoy watching those. Maybe if you've watched this far, let me know in the comments if it's even worth my time to do those time lapse things, because they're somewhat easy to set up, but I don't know. I think it's probably just a point of the video that everybody skips through anyway. So all that being said, let me show you what I got going on here. Okay, so we're pretty much like ready to rock here, okay? So pumps mounted, grounded, and this is my sensor wire, okay, that chases up here and goes all the way into the cab. I'll take you in the cab and show you what's going on there in a second. You guys have kind of seen everything somewhat air quote tucked, and it's about 98% tucked, okay? My power stud up here is tightened down, ready to rock. I don't think there's anything else that's going to go on there. Every other component of this whole transformation is going to be mounted on, like inside the engine compartment on the starter solenoid. I don't have the tank in there yet, but the reason being is I need to wire these electric fans, and I just wanted as much room as possible to work with in here. I've even still got the horns laying on the hoist here. So anyway, yeah, we're all good to go here. Now you can kind of see I've rigged up my own personal ground stud here, and that's somewhat part and parcel with cutting, I talked about it earlier, but cutting that plug off of my ground wire, this guy. Okay, so rather than having that plug now, everything runs over to that stud I just showed you, including the ground wire that comes on like an OEM cable. So that goes down to that stud, grounds the chassis, and also grounds a lot of things that I've got going on under here, including this Snow Performance pump. I'll also be using that stud for my fan relays, and I will also be using it for, I got to ground that washer fluid reservoir sensor as well. And this is the other end of it, okay? So that's now routed up and into the cab, and that will talk to that VC50 Snow Performance gauge / controller. I think that's about everything I got going on in here, folks. Now, under the hood, we're kind of, well, we're somewhat high and tight. New cables, so I ran a new negative, new positive, nothing crazy there. My other ones were the terminals were getting a little tired. So everything's obviously off the shock tower now. Those whole harnesses there ran underneath and in through the shock tower. So I think we're in good shape under here. Now, in the cab, I'm going to show you guys where I ran this wire. Maybe not from this angle because it'll be way too hard for me to get up and under and in the firewall. But I have, I don't know, I think there's about 5 wires in this looming here. And what those are is 3 of them are going to be, well, for this boost reference. Okay. You got, oh goodness, here's the other end of it. 3 wires here, okay. I should have showed you that under the hood. I'll take you back under there. Anyway, 3 of those are for that. 1 is for my low fluid sensor, this purple wire. And the other one is, it goes to the pump. So the gauge can tell the pump when it needs to turn on based off the boost reference. And sorry, back under the hood here real quick. I've got this harness, homemade harness of mine, built. There's 4 wires in it, okay. 3 are for that boost reference, and 1 is actually for the next project, which is going to be a manual override for those contour electric fans, okay. That's going to be the next video, folks. I think that makes the most chronological sense in this whole unfolding of the Kenne Bell. I know everyone's dying to see that bolted on there, but I've said it before, I'll say it again. That's the easy part, folks. That's 8 bolts. We can have that thing set on there, but I got to dick around with the accessory drive here, got to move my power steering pump down, and then I got the vintage air kit, right? And that's actually why I haven't wired up that gauge, because the dash needs to come out so I can remove my heater box. There's a lot of moving parts to this whole endeavor. So, yeah, I think that kind of wraps the meth kit for now. Like I mentioned at the start of this, these videos are going to be somewhat of a mix match, dog's breakfast. Probably said that way too many times. Some people like to play drinking games with me saying ultimately, or in this case, maybe dog's breakfast. Hey, whatever you're up to, I'll maybe hopefully one day I can join you for a beer and we'll play drinking games watching my videos. Anyway, lots of cool stuff to come. Like I say, I think the next thing will be this fan system. And I have done a contour fan install on Project Revert. So this may not be as in-depth from the step-by-step how I did it in the other video. However, this contour fan setup is going to have a little bit of a different twist to it in how it's going to be controlled. It's going to be controlled 2 different ways. One of which I control, one of which a sensor controls. So stay tuned for that. I think it's pretty neat. I'm not the first one to do it. I actually had it recommended to me by a buddy. So that'll be pretty neat. And then from there, man, I'm dreading that vintage air install. Like, I'm excited about it, but I'm definitely dreading pulling that dash. Good grief. Especially, I've got my air ride gauges in there, and those got all kinds of wires coming off the back of them, right? I got Matthew Puzzi's the gauge pods, right? And that's why I didn't put this one in there yet, right? That whole dash's got to come out. Anyway, I am excited for that install, but it's going to be a heavy lift. And yeah, I think that's about it. So anyway, stay tuned for more dog's breakfast videos, okay? And very, very soon, that bad boy, that air pump, will be on this car. I promise you, okay? I got a lot of people thinking that I'm not going to get this done. Trust me, I'm like flat out giving her every spare moment I have. So thanks so much for tuning in, folks. I hope this video helps you. If it did, please share it along to somebody you think it may help as well. And if you got any questions on any of this stuff, this is my first meth kit install, but I learned a lot and I may be able to help you out. Hit me up in the comments, go to my website, send me an email, whatever. I appreciate each and every one of you guys. Thanks so much for watching. Till next time, take care. Bye for now.